Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 464. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind, interested in learning about trauma, and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's traumatherapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am super excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Esly Regina Carvalho. Esly, welcome.
Thank you very much for your invitation to be here.
All right. So Dr. Carvalho is a Brazilian-American clinical psychologist who maintained a private practice in the Dallas area where she grew up for many years before her return to Brazil in 2006, where she now directs a TraumaClinic and spends extended time training EMDR professionals in that country. Just quickly, where is the TraumaClinic?
It's in Brasilia, in the capital of the country.
Brasilia, okay. So Dr. Carvalho was trained in EMDR in the U.S. And eventually became trainer of trainers with the EMDR Institute. Since her return to her native country, over 3,000 EMDR therapists have been trained through the efforts of her team. EMDR training is offered in over 20 cities in Brazil, as well as advanced courses. Dr. Carvalho served the first two terms as EMDR president, the EMDR Regional Association for Latin America. Her first training approach was in psychodrama, and Esly was approved with distinction as a trainer, educator, and practitioner by the American Board of Examiners in Psychodrama in the U.S. Awesome. We talk a lot about that psychodrama on this podcast, which I love. Anyway, welcome. I'm super excited you're here. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Before we get going here, where are you from originally, and where are you right now?
That is always a very hard question. I am what you can call a third culture kid, okay, because I was born in Brazil. My parents are Brazilian, but I went to the States when I was very little. My father went initially to study and eventually immigrated to Dallas. And so I did all of my learning and reading and writing and stuff and the numbers in English. And I lived in the Dallas area until I was 15. And then I returned to Brazil almost 16, which is when I learned to read and write in Portuguese, which is our native language. I did my professional training here in Brazil. And then in 1990, I had gone through a divorce. I had a young child. I had an invitation to go to Ecuador. So I ventured off into the wild blue yonder and moved to Ecuador. And so I learned Spanish. And I also married a widower there who dragged me around a lot of other places as well. So that's how I wound up in Colorado Springs and La Paz, Bolivia. And then back to Colorado, eventually back to Quito. Then he was transferred to Dallas, which I really enjoyed because I have childhood friends from Dallas. You know, my friends can still speak, Southern. I learned Texan, so I learned English.
Nice. Very good.
Well, I got that beaten out of me. And I lost everything but the y'all unless I'm in a room full of Texans. And then it comes back lickety-split.
Wow.
And then in 2006, he was transferred to Brazil. And when he retired, I said, okay, my turn. We stay. Because by then I had established, the movement, had begun to establish the movement for the EMDR movement for Brazil, and it was going strong. So I said, okay, I've done my share. Now you do your share.
Nice. All right, Esly, how did you get there? How did you get into this field? I want to hear that story.
I guess the first story has to do with my mom, I grew up, with youth groups and things like that. And when I was 16, here in Brazil, when you go into the university, you have to choose the profession you're going to go into. And so I didn't know what to do. And my mother says, well, I think you should do psychology. And I looked at her and I said, are you crazy? I don't want to work with, lunatics and crazy people and things like that, And she says, no, psychologists don't do that. They talk to normal people who have problems and they help them get through their problems. And you really have a gift. And I said, what do you mean? She says, well, the kids come here and you're in your bedroom till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, counseling them and giving them advice. You have a gift. So when you're 16, what do you think your mother knows, right? Nothing. Right. But 3 years later, when I signed up for school, I signed up for psychology and I never looked back. So I did all of my initial training here in Brazil, my master's as well. And then later on, I did a doctorate, just more recently, really. And that's how I got into psychology. Then years later, I started working with organizations, nonprofit organizations that did crisis intervention in Latin America. So I really got interested in that and being able to help with like disasters and tragedies and training facilitators who could help facilitate the grief recovery, the emotion recovery after these crises.
What was it, if I may, what was it about that intrigued you?
I think by then I was a psychodramatist. Psychodrama is a big movement here in Brazil, and that was my first training even before I finished school. And so I've always been able to see the big picture as far as social intervention is concerned. And when I saw that maybe we could reach out and heal and treat and help a large scale number of people instead of one by one or even group by group inside of our clinics, inside of our office, that really called my attention. I thought, wow, this is amazing. And so I went from Cuba to Chile over a period of time with different organizations I worked with, training people in this area. And I got involved in other social issues. This was back in I moved there in 1990. So AIDS was, really on the scene. How do we help people? Some of these were religious organizations. How can we pastorally help people who are dealing with these issues? Domestic violence, issues that the church doesn't always want to talk about, but that are important. And, trauma recovery, although we didn't talk about trauma recovery back there. We talked about, the disasters and the tragedies and how we had to be able to help. And so I went and helped with after Hurricane Mitch, when Honduras took 50 years back, 50 years back from the amount of destruction that was there. And so I helped in a hospital. They're training the staff on how they could help people come out of these things. So we were going through civil wars in Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, the Sendero Luminoso in Peru. I once had to help smuggle a friend out of Peru to save her life because they had threatened her because she was in a religious organization and she was trying to help people. Right. So we snuck her out.
So did you just feel like you had a particular facility to get in there in crisis, times of crisis and help? Was that what attracted you to doing crisis intervention and trauma and so forth? Trying to understand what that was that said, I'm into this.
Yeah, I think compassion is one of the words that I think would characterize me. It's one of the characteristics that I think is most important in life, is being able to put yourself as a psychodramatist in somebody else's shoes. And as I saw their suffering, their pain, I said, there's got to be a way to help. There's got to be a way to help moms, and their kids and the fathers and the alcoholism and the violence. We've got to do something to make the world a better place. I know that's kind of really cliche and stuff, but I felt that I could really, make a difference. In fact, this is one of the things that brought me back to Brazil when I was a teenager, when we started talking about returning, because I always felt like, well, if I live in the States, I can be one more of whatever it is that I'm going to become. But if I return to my native country, maybe I can make a difference. And I think this is has been one of the motors that has driven me in Latin America and Brazil is, can I use my life to make a difference in the lives of other people? Otherwise, I don't think life has a lot of meaning if we don't, if we aren't involved with others in that sense. Then I had the gift of languages. I could pick up languages. I connect easily with people. I tend to be able to put them at ease fairly quickly. I once interviewed my mother-in-law, who spent many years, and she was British, from London, and she spent major part of her life in China. And I interviewed her, and my sisters-in-law said, how did you ever get that much information out of her? Because she's so stiff and, stiff upper lip and things. And I said, well, I earn a living interviewing. So I think all of those things, plus the connections, we slowly had the networking. We had people that were connected from all of these countries. And so I would go and I would train and I would speak and I would counsel them. And they would share their pain with me. And I think seeing that is one of it still touches me when I think of a young woman in Bolivia who came to me when she was about 26, 27. And she said, I didn't know that it wasn't normal to have violence in marriage until I was 26. And I looked at her and said, really? And she says, yeah, I saw my parents do this. My father, always beat on her. And then I got married and my husband beat on me. And I thought, well, I guess this is just the way marriage is. And I had been working in Ecuador with a shelter, and we had organized a workbook. In fact, it's now available for free, perma-free on Amazon, to help women come out of violence. And I had collected sayings, cultural sayings that help maintain violence in our cultures. And it was horrible. Some of them would say,
maintain violence.
Help maintain violence. Things like, things like in Brazil, they would say, a mother would say to her daughter, it's bad with him. It's much worse without him. It's mal com ele, pior sem ele. Or in Peru, they would say, it's the more he beats on me, the more he shows he loves me.
Oh, boy.
In Ecuador, the indigenous population had a saying that would say, well, he is the husband. Even if he beats on me, even if he kills me, he is the husband. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, my goodness, how do we break the power of these words in these situations? And that's kind of how the booklet came together. And it's a combination of psychodrama and sharing, and it made a lot of difference, especially with the lives of women who were illiterate. A lot of this is just with drawings or pictures or role playing.
Wow. What an interesting concept. What's the name of that book?
It's called Breaking Free.
Okay,
and
we'll have that linked up at the show notes page.
You need to put my name in there because there's a lot of books with that title, but this is the way. It's just a workbook, but it will really, and it's free. So,
so is that? Are those sayings? Is that language still rife through the culture, Latin American culture, and
in many places, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we've been able to change it now. Thank goodness now we have not only television, we have the internet, we have podcasts, we have all sorts of things, YouTube, where we can teach and inform people more about it. And some governments, some organizations have taken it upon themselves to speak about sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, which is rampant in Latin America. I would think, they have numbers like, 70% of certain populations have had an experience in sexual abuse. Women, by the time they're 18, I think it's closer to 95 if we include, visual or verbal abuse. It's terrible. But I think we've had organizations that have slowly begun to make a dent in this, and now we're I think, much more free to be able to talk about this from different platforms. Even the church platform, we've been able to talk about these things, which didn't always make me real popular, but it made me very relevant. And
so you said that when I asked you what was it that kind of almost compelled you to work with people in crisis, and you mentioned the word compassion. And of course, it's one thing for us to be compassionate and to even be drawn to a particular population, if you will, but it's another to work with them and to experience that, and to constantly hear stories and are oftentimes horror stories. How did that impact you, Esly, as you were working in that? And now maybe it still does.
Yeah, it still does. I think that if we want to be caring human beings, we can never lose our ability to hurt with others. I have funny things, strange things to protect myself from some of these things. One is, I've been married now to my widower for 28 years. I asked to go to the movies once. I don't go to the movies. I'm a very visual person. I'm an artist. I paint, I draw, I see, and the pictures stick with me. So I have limited myself to listening to the real stories that come to my doorstep. The ones I hear in my office, the ones that I have heard and listened to from other colleagues who want my help or who are working in these areas, and their stories and the stories when we connect with these groups. So I don't listen to anything extra. I'm not going to go out and pay to hear difficult stories, painful stories, because I guard my heart to be able to continue to be compassionate with those that I really still want to connect with. So I think that's one of the things.
All right, folks, I want to thank my sponsor for this episode, Talkspace. We all know change is constant, but these days it feels like there's something new to grapple with every single day. We may all be adjusting to this new normal, but it's still stressful, and so it's important to talk about it and seek support. Talkspace Online Therapy is here to give you that support because we all need it right now. Match with a licensed therapist from the convenience of your device, no matter where you are. Reach out to your therapist 24/7 from phone or computer, and you'll hear back 5 days a week. 1 month on Talkspace costs about the same amount as a single in-person therapy session. But with Talkspace, you can send unlimited messages to your therapist, and they'll engage with you at least 5 days a week. That means you never have to wait to share what's on your mind. The bottom line is that we all need to talk sometimes, and Talkspace wants to give more support we deserve at a price we can afford. As a listener of the Trauma Therapist Podcast, that's you. You get $100 off your first month on Talkspace. To match with your perfect therapist, go to Talkspace.com or download the app and make sure to use the code TraumaTherapist to get $100 off your first month and show your support for this show. Once again, go to Talkspace.com and use the code TraumaTherapist.
And the other, I think, is, can we make a difference here? And I think that when we begin to make a difference, and I think that's where EMDR came in. I think psychodrama gave me the big picture to ability to see things on a continental basis and, to really scale up. When I went into EMDR, then I really had to go from the group, in the community into one by one. And I'm very pleased that now we have group protocols for EMDR, because that really is my passion. Moreno used to say that we get sick in groups. We have to get well in groups. We have to get well in our relationships. So when I began to see EMDR, the first time I walked into a session, I walked out of my first session as a client in 1995, and I said, I have got to learn to do this. I don't care how much it costs. I don't care what this is going to mean. And that's how I get started. And so being able to have tools that can heal people, that made an enormous difference, because now I'm encouraged to continue to work, because I know we have something that works and that can really make a difference. Not that psychodrama didn't on a different scale, but there are different dimensions, there are different ways of going at it.
You've been doing this for a while, and I want to ask you, what were some or one kind of the early kind of clinical errors or mistakes that you experienced? And I want to ask this because a lot of listeners are just starting out. They may even be experienced therapists, but they're just kind of getting into trauma, learning about trauma now. But Esly, share with us a story, if you will.
Okay. I have one from early on in EMDR. And I share this story usually when I start talking about dissociation in my training workshops, because I think it makes a point. We often tend to tell so many of the stories where things go right. Well, this one went wrong. I had a patient in one of my other countries who had been my psychodrama client in a group for many years, and who had suffered a sexual abuse experience when she was 7. So I called her into the office and I said, how about we do an individual session with EMDR to help you get past this, because this is really painful. She said, sure. So we did, and we set up the protocol. She was holding the buzzers in her hands with her eyes closed, and all of a sudden she dissociated. She became the 7-year-old child, and she thought I was the abuser. Well, it spooked me, certainly spooked her, and we got her back to the present, and we straightened things out, scared the bejesus out of me. But it also made me a believer in dissociation, because I think up until then, it's kind of like I've directed over 10,000 psychodramas, and I've seen a lot of stuff. Wow. But that was something, I have seen a lot of stuff. But that was something that really kind of, this is something different. Maybe this isn't just one of those American things that the gringos think that really happens in the United States and doesn't happen in our country, because we've never heard of this, And I thought, they're right. This really exists. So
what happened? What was going on with her?
We were just processing the experience of the abuser coming after her when she was 7 years old, and she lost her ability to stay in the present. She lost her consciousness of being an adult and became this 7-year-old child. And when I went closer to her, kind of like to reach out to her, she really screamed and yelled then, don't come near me, because she thought I was the abuser.
Oh, wow.
So I just stood there for a while and said, I called her by her name, and I said, so-and-so, look at me, this is your name, this is my name, this is where we are, and I brought her back into the present. Now, I'll confess, I never did EMDR with her again. Game over. We're not doing this until I have more experience. And in the countries where I was, there were no supervisors, no consultants, and we didn't have Skype or Zoom or internet or any of these things back then to be able to consult from a distance. So I said, we're going to be safe, we're going to be prudent, we're going to leave this alone. Mm-hmm. She did get better. She was in my psychodrama groups when we continued to work, and she had a lot of improvement, but we aren't going to do it. I wasn't willing to try that again.
So looking back, what's your takeaway?
Is that we need to be careful, okay? I think that, especially with psychodrama to a large extent, but EMDR even more so, I see it as surgery. I consider myself an emotional surgeon, and I have a very sharp scalpel. And it is very good, and it is very efficient, and it can do a lot of damage if it cuts in the wrong place or it cuts in the wrong way. And so we need to be able to know what we're doing, know the anatomy of pain, the anatomy of hurt, the anatomy of our patients' hearts and what they're doing and what they're going through, in order to be able to cut in the right places and get the infection out, get the splinters out, get the bad stuff out of their hearts, and throw the alcohol on there, stitch it up sometimes, because we do, and then let them convalesce. We need to know what we're doing. We need to know the anatomy of this thing.
So are you saying she wasn't a good candidate for EMDR, or did you rush the situation?
I think she was a good candidate. I don't think I had, and I don't know that there were back then, enough tools to have done it in a safer way. I don't think I believed dissociation could really happen. There was no indication that she would have dissociated because of her diagnosis or anything else. I mean, there was no indication that I should have been more careful. Okay. I think I just hit the nerve. I just hit that nerve, because she was absolutely functional. She didn't have a serious diagnosis, or she just had that one really bad experience. And I hit it. I don't think I was competent enough. I didn't have enough of the right tools. Today, I would do things differently. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, and that's really valuable for people to hear, wow, this person here who's had all this experience had that experience when, they were a newer clinician, and things happen. Mm-hmm. Things happen.
They do. Yeah.
I loved the idea of how you talked about psychodrama kind of in a kind of community way, and EMDR in a more individual experience. What are you doing right now, presently, professionally? Talk to us about that.
Okay, I'm doing a lot of things. Just one thing, two observations I think about things I've learned. Psychodrama taught me that the body does not lie. So I can believe what the body is saying. And I really, really appreciate today, one of the things that I really like working with are the psychosomatic diseases, illnesses in general, accidents, things that happen in the body, migraines, pain, chronic pain, as a result of that. And I like to treat that with EMDR. And I've really developed a lot of courses, even some online courses, on how we can do this. And I've gone on to integrate a lot of my work with psychodrama and EMDR. Instead of talking about, dissociation in terms of parts or other theories, I talk about roles. We have the roles that live inside us. I talk about the folks who live inside of us. And this makes it a much more daily language, for a colloquial language, where even our patients can come in and say, I had one that came in and says, I went to the United States, and when I came back home, I opened my suitcase, and all of the little brats that live inside of my husband came to see what I had bought. And they were all complaining that I brought more presents for everybody else than for him. So this is a language they can use. It's not like her husband is having a jealousy fit. All the little brats inside of him came out, and so you don't have to make people feel guilty or bad or shame them. Everybody has these folks who live inside. I go to the doctor's office and I say, everybody has a doctor who lives inside. If you don't convince the doctor that they should take the doctor inside of us, that they should take the medication, they'll throw away the prescription on the way out the door. Mm-hmm. And they do. And so those are one of the things. And I think the trauma pain thing really came clear to me, I think, with two cases. One was a friend of mine who would have migraine headaches whenever she sat under a bright light. And it was notorious in her family. Her kids would say, Mommy, don't sit there in the restaurant because you're going to get a headache. Mm-hmm. And long story short, when she did an EMDR session about some surgery she had done recently, her brain went back and pulled up an old surgery she had done 15, 20 years before, where she had almost died. And she recovered the memory of having woken up in the middle of the surgery.
Whoa.
She didn't have pain, physical pain, but she says, I can describe all the doctors. And when I opened my eyes, the pain, the headache I had from the bright light above me in the operating room, and the nausea. And obviously, they just, elbowed each other and put her back to sleep. And it was such a difficult and touch and go recovery where she almost went that nobody remembered this anymore. Once she processed that, she never had another migraine. This has been 6 years. So that really said, and then I had a patient who had open heart surgery, and she was not afraid of dying before surgery when she had a congenital hole in her heart, and she had a high risk of dying. After surgery, she was afraid of dying. And that's when I realized, the body does not like to be cut open. We have skin, so stuff on the outside stays on the outside, and stuff on the inside stays on the inside. Do we have to operate? Yes, we do. Does the body like it? No way. So I think these are some of the things that we have to work. So I'm doing a lot of that kind of work in my office. I have a small publishing house because we started training EMDR in Brazil without books in my language. So we had to work on these things. And it was one of the reasons I started writing books as well. I had written some other ones before, but then I started writing some on EMDR, translating some of the more important books. And Francine Shapiro's book, her third edition, will come out next month as a result of that. And I do a little bit of research on my own nickel and on my own. We did some work with neuroimages with SPECT scans, where we did 3 sessions of EMDR with people who had needle phobia. The first time, the worst time, and the next time they had to face a needle. We had people who were afraid of getting pregnant because they had to do blood tests during the pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And so the doctors who did the SPECT scans did not believe that there would be a difference in the pre and post. But 3 sessions later, they did see it. Made a believer out of them.
Wow. So you are busy.
I'm busy. And I'm always involved in humanitarian work, taking EMDR to other countries. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me remind everyone that I'm speaking with Dr. Esly Carvalho. She's a clinical psychologist in Brazil. How can people reach you? What's the best way?
Well, I guess the English website is called PLAZA, P-L-A-Z-A, Counseling Services. Counseling written like the Americans do, not like the Brits or the Canadians. Okay. PLAZACounselingServices.com. I have a website called TraumaClinic.com.br, but that one is mostly in Portuguese.
Okay.
And I have some online courses with the Steve Frankel Group, sfrankelgroup.com. And those who are EMDR therapists can see the online courses, including how to treat, body symptoms with EMDR through their website as well.
Okay, so those courses are not on your website. We'll have to go through Steve Frankel.
We'd
Okay.
have to go through them. The ones in English, because I do it in Portuguese, but if they do the English ones.
Got it. Okay, so we'll make sure to link those up. Esly, how about a go-to book recommendation? Anything that's kind of inspiring you, whether trauma-related or EMDR-related or not?
Well, I think I am very Latin. And more than being visual and reading, I'm a people person. And so I think mentors have been much more important in my life than books. And so I'm very grateful to Moreno for having developed psychodrama, to Francine Shapiro for having developed EMDR. And they are, nowadays my go-to people. But I had other mentors over the years. And so I think we're more relational than we are verbal, And so I think of the people who have influenced my life, especially, through having spent so many years together working with these things.
So we'll have Moreno and Francine Shapiro. We'll have those linked up.
Right.
You are a delight and an inspiration. And, when you jump on, you're going to have a good conversation with someone. And I kind of knew that with you. I really appreciate you sharing your passion. You can feel it.
Thank you. I am passionate about what I do, and I am very enthusiastic. And I want to reach my whole country, my whole continent, for the better, to make a difference and really be able to help people heal, help them overcome. I said that they have to overcome the challenges of life. And this is what I'm committed to, really, to helping them overcome the challenges of life. We all have them.
Yeah, we certainly do. All right, Esly, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.